Tonight on GGP News, an in-depth look at urbanization, moving people out of the country and into the cities. GGP News with Alex Schoddart.
Good evening, I'm Alex Schoddart. More than half the world's population lives in urban areas. That surprising statistic is part of a new UN report released this year. In 1950, 30% of the world's population lived in an urban area. Today, that number is just shy of 55%. The United Nations World Urbanization Prospects 2014 revision was released this year and declares that the coming decades will bring unprecedented changes, with the percentage of people living in an urban area set to pass 90% by 2050. What might that look like? Well, take a look at this video from NASA's Goddard Space Center, chronicling the expansion of Las Vegas over the past 40 years. During that time, the population rose from 273 to 603,000. The Earth's population from 3.7 to 6.8 billion. Imagine scenes like this playing out globally. Many people have taken a stance on urbanization and have spoken out against the potential eventualities. One such person is Oswald de Henswald, whose recent YouTube video has more than 5 views.
Humans take up space. It's how we function. We need places to eat. We need places to sleep, play, to take out our garbage, clean our dog. And it's all these components in the space that we take up that creates urbanization. So what do we know? We've been saying it forever. We've learned it since we were kids that urbanization diminishes habitats for animals. Well, okay, what's the big deal? They can go elsewhere. They can adapt their nature. That's what they do. Well, not really. What about those that live in these developed areas? What about squirrels, raccoons, porcupines, various other critters that we have running around Edmonton, and they go around collecting acorns? And garbage. You can't forget garbage. So they may have adapted to their new lives, to their new urbanized lives, but don't forget that everything in this world has a price, and they're paying for it with their own behavior. Now, what kind of behavior am I talking about? It's the basic thing that's been keeping them alive for thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, which is running away. In a recent study by Chapman, Pillar, and Reimer, they found that squirrels are losing this basic flight instinct, and instead they just look at you instead of running away. And it's not just squirrels, it's in everything. It's in coyotes, deer, foxes, chipmunks, even moose. And what does this equal? Well, roadkill essentially, but it also has a huge pest problem and implications for ourselves. Okay, so behaviors and habitats are affected, but what's the big deal? Are you kidding me? Well, how about this? Biodiversity is on the losing end of the spectrum as well. Biodiversity is diminishing in birds, squirrels, insects, plants, and even humans in our native population. Birds especially, because farmland birds are a huge part of that ecosystem, and they're all diminishing in the biodiversity areas, as well as migration habits in city birds. And this is leading to what was called in 2014 a gene pollution. Oh, so you probably knew about that too. And well, you know about the pollution associated with urbanization, whether it be runoff from roads, maybe some kitchen waste, nuclear waste, agriculture waste. This is agriculture waste, this is farming waste. There's also human waste, noise pollution, air pollution, every kind of pollution. Okay, so maybe you know the basic effects just like everyone else. Congrats. But why should I care and why should you care? Why should we as a society care? Is it really affecting us? You might think not, but also you might be surprised.
Well, that certainly raises some important points. For a more in-depth report, let's go live to Rhea Litychek, currently in Shanghai. I'm just getting word that in fact, due to budget cuts, Rhea is reporting live from Chinatown.
Thank you, Alex. As Oswald's video just showed us, rising concerns from scientists regarding habitat and biodiversity loss due to urbanization might be obvious, but they don't necessarily translate into a legitimate or tangible threat for most people. However, the effects might be more real than they seem. An article published earlier this year in the Journal of Biological Conservation revealed some alarming facts. Researchers surveyed over 1,000 children in China at 15 elementary schools in areas ranging from rural to large urbanized cities. Children filled out a questionnaire designed to gauge their contact with nature, their biophilia, biophobia, their willingness to conserve animals, and their general attitudes towards animal conservation. What they found was that the children's contact with nature was significantly and positively related to their biophilia, while being negatively related to their biophobia. What this means is that for these students, contact with nature positively affected their willingness to conserve animals and their general attitudes about conservation. Conversely, less contact with nature bred apathy towards environmental concerns and wildlife. The lesson here is that the children of today, who are the leaders and policymakers of tomorrow, are growing up in an environment that doesn't actually foster a protective attitude towards nature. This means that the future of sustainability, resource management, ecologically friendly laws and policies, and animal conservation might be handled by people who, quite simply, just don't care. In recent decades, there has been a decline in outdoor recreation among children and outdoor activities among adults. Green spaces have shrunken, and this reflects a new culture focused more on technology and indoor recreation. However, there still are things that we can do. Summer camps, programs run by botanical gardens and zoological parks, and increased safe and accessible green spaces can all enhance contact with nature starting at an early age. And while it is inevitable that a booming global population, coupled with increasing demands on our planet, will lead to urbanization, the harsh reality is that nature will suffer if we don't find a balance. But, as reports like these suggest, if we don't do something soon, we are coming dangerously close to tipping the scale. I am Rhea Ledychek, GGP News, Edmonton.
Thank you, Rhea. Those are some interesting points with regards to changing attitudes and how those will change future environmental policy. But it's not just environmental policy about which we need to be concerned. There are also several important sociological implications that must be taken into account. Earlier today, I spoke with Dr. Fact of Life, an expert on human health and public policy at the University of Atrebla.
So what we see with urbanization is that we have many effects on the ecosystems, both in the surrounding ecosystems and those actually within the urban area. I think to many people those effects are obvious, but that's not what people care about. People care about themselves and other people, their family members and friends. How does this affect me is the most important question on everyone's mind. A common argument is that the quality of life has improved due to urbanization. There are advantages, but the fact remains that we see increases in the rate of crime and poverty due to urbanization, as revealed by Flango and Charbonneau's 1976 paper. They claimed that crime rates could be correlated to the size of cities, whose slums are a major center for crime. There are, of course, many factors to this, the most notable being the issue of poverty. Another researcher, BIOL and his colleagues, showed that the number of poor people, we're talking people living on $1 a day and some even less than that, rose by 50 million in urban areas from 1993 to 2002. Another big issue regarding poverty is that we have no way of predicting where cases of extreme poverty will arise. For example, the same researchers showed that in Central and Southern America, there is a huge number of people living in urban areas who are extremely poor, whereas in Eastern Asia, there aren't as many cases. In fact, according to them in Eastern Asia, poverty-stricken people move out of urban areas and towards rural settings. So it's very difficult to predict, but as a general statistic, we see the distribution of poor individuals shifting towards more urban areas. Though it may not seem like a problem to us here in the West, access to sanitation and clean drinking water, a major necessity of life, are still challenges being faced in the third world. It has been shown that increases in the population of urban areas increase the demand on water resources in the area. There are ways of using water resources sustainably, but in many regions of the world we see a demand increase on a resource that is already at its limit. For example, in Minkin, China, there is an extreme shortage of water. According to a recent study by Yan and his colleagues in 2014, the problem is so serious that surface water and runoff have to be utilized because of an extreme shortage of groundwater in the area. This has some obvious impacts on the ecosystem which surrounds the city. According to Yan and his team, the surface vegetation in the grassland ecosystem degenerate as a result of the lack of water. Now, you might think that this isn't harmful to people, but in fact it is. Many people in the region are farmers, and desertification has become a huge problem in China. We use water for just about everything, so cleaning it up so that it can be used again is a big challenge. For example, in Southeast Asia, one of the most populated regions on the planet, microbiological contamination from human waste is a huge problem, according to a 2013 article from Thuy and others. Without proper sanitation, contaminated water can propagate disease. Urbanization then becomes a problem because there are a lot of people in a relatively small area of land. Diseases can spread amongst individuals much faster if they live within a rather close proximity. For example, in Madagascar, Olivier and his colleagues linked the spread of schistomiasis to urbanization in their 1999 paper. The high concentration and the migration of people towards urban areas was shown to be the cause. There are, of course, things we can do to prevent this. Access to healthcare is one major example.
Human health, the environment, and the future all depend on our response to this issue. But of course, none of these factors can be looked at in isolation. We all have a responsibility to start making changes. That's GGP News for this evening. Thanks for watching. I'm Alex Schoddart.